So the question is, how do I want to be an American citizen? And I would like to take a really deep look at my own motivation. I grew up in a conservative household, became progressive because of what happened in the 60s and 70s. And I think I've always been progressive, but I haven't been able to define it because I didn't really look at myself and what I wanted to express as my citizenship. So I've had my past and I'll have my future, but as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the most important aspect of myself is inside of me. What's inside is really important. And that's what I'm looking at as an American citizen in this day and age that we're living in. I looked at, am I willing to maybe go to jail because I believe in human rights or the reproductive rights of women? Am I truthful in myself, with myself, in the way I'm looking at what I would do to preserve my progressive outlook in citizenship? So the truth for me is really important. I don't want to have a half-truth inside of myself. I really want to express my own beliefs. And I think that my friends and my family really understand where I am coming from as a progressive. And what I'm hoping is that my friends and my family can talk to each other in an open, dignified way so that we don't get angry and we don't shout, but we are able to really be who we are with each other. And that's important to me. And I think my citizenship needs to be transparent. In other words, I want people to understand where I'm coming from, and I want to understand where they're coming from. I want to treat other people with dignity and respect, and I would like them to treat me the same way. And I think that that is a good basis to start looking at how to be a progressive United States citizen.
So the way that you look at citizenship, Karen, is almost like it's kind of a spiritual act. And that sort of reminds me of something that John Lewis said when he said that the act of voting and taking part in the political process and being a citizen was almost sacred. And it really seems like you're coming from that same point.
Yes, definitely. Because it's who I am. It's how I look at the world. I look at the world and people in the world as precious and sacred. So our actions should reflect how we feel on the inside. And I've been feeling this forever, I think, since I was a teenager. Precious and sacred, everything that I try to do to make the world a better place, basically.
Yeah, that sounds very much like John Lewis. So
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I can be part of that kind of movement.
Wow, Karen, that is really strong. And I see a little bit more some of the things that you have shared with us previously about starting from within. I really feel like I incorporated a lot of those commitments as a young person via my parents, even though they were not anything close to what you would call progressive, but they were very responsible citizens, always voting, showing me that that was important to be part of the country. But most of I looked at some definitions of citizenship, and the very simplest one was membership in a community. And then another one added the word participatory membership in a community. And that really resonates with me. I think I have been a good participatory member in a number of different communities, but only in the last 20 years or so have applied that approach to participating in political communities.
I think that's a really good definition, Sue Ellen. The participatory element is really important, because in order to be an active citizen, you have to participate. You can't not participate. I think one of the things that is most obvious to me about these things that we're talking about is how for many of us, these are acts are almost like unconscious. They're part of our being. They're not something that we set out to decide to do. Whereas for me, it was very different. I very much decided at some point in the 1990s, I mean, I had always voted, but I decided that I was going to be the best person I could be, as opposed to like a young, stupid, idiot jerk like I was. And, you know, that entailed being an active citizen, because for me, like, I'm a white male. I'm like, nothing bad is going to happen to me from the political process. I'm always going to skate on all of that stuff. So if I want to be a good citizen, I have to think about the effects of my actions on other people. And so I decided that in order to do that, I had to become a better, more observant, more intelligent person and look at how my actions or non-actions in the political realm affected other people that weren't white males like me. So for me, it was very much a conscious decision. It wasn't something that came naturally to me, but I'm glad I decided to do that. So.
Yeah, Matt, that's great. I have a story I'd like to share, and I don't know if you the group here has ever heard the story of the hummingbird.
I have
And
not.
It's a very short story, but it inspired me about 20 years ago. So I'll start to read. One day, a terrible fire broke out in the forest. A huge woodland was suddenly engulfed by a raging wildfire. Frightened, all the animals fled their homes and ran out of the forest. As they came to the edge of a stream, they stopped to watch the fire, and they were feeling very discouraged and powerless. They were all bemoaning the destruction of their homes. Every one of them thought that there was nothing that they could do about the fire except one little hummingbird. This particular hummingbird decided it would do something. It swooped into the stream and picked up a few drops of water and went to the forest and put them on the fire. Then it went back to the stream and did it again. And it kept going back again and again and again. All the other animals watched in disbelief. Some tried to discourage the hummingbird with comments like, "Don't bother. It's too much. You are too little. Your wings will burn. Your beak will is too tiny. It's only a drop. You can't put out the fire. And as the animals stood around disparaging the little bird's efforts, the bird noticed how hopeless and forlorn they looked. Then one of the animals shouted out and challenged the hummingbird in a mocking voice. "What do you think you're doing?" And the hummingbird, without wasting time or losing a beat, looked back and said, "I'm doing what I can." And like the hummingbird, each of us can do what we can. And so that can-do attitude is what we need now, I think, in order to help people realize what America could be, what we can accomplish, not what we can't accomplish. And that little story has helped me for 20 years.
It's a really great story. And I think it speaks exactly to this sort of hopelessness that some people get into. And I suspect a little bit that there's a little bit of either we're too busy or we don't want to get involved because someone in the political process has put them off. But I just find that so inspiring and useful to tell myself, okay, I can't do everything. This is what I can do, and then do it. And then I don't get to feeling hopeless.
And I think another thing that story points out, because the hummingbird got stuck doing it all alone, is how important it is to do things like this with others and to realize, you know, your voice or your individual vote may not matter. But if you and 10 other people get together, then it starts to matter. And the larger the wave becomes, the more hummingbirds are dropping water on the fire. That's when things get powerful. And I think that's something that you know, the civil rights movement recognized, in some of the anti-war movement that you two saw in the 60s and the 70s, realized that you have to it has to be collective action. Nobody can do something by themselves. I mean, we in this country tend to think of heroes and leaders, and we ignore all the people that had their backs. I mean, I always think of that famous photograph of MLK at the reflecting pool in Washington, when he's standing at the podium and you look out and you see what looks like 20 million people in the crowd. Those people all had his back. He wasn't alone. And so when we think of, I can't change anything, there's no point, I personally can't, but we can. And I think that is a really important thing for all of us to keep in mind. And that story perfectly illustrates it.
Yeah, definitely. We have to have, Martin Luther King was a leader. He began a movement. We can do something like that, but we need other people to join.
Right, a leader without followers is just some guy on the street corner. So.
Exactly. Yep.
So here's a question, kind of following along that track. And going back to the participation that I mentioned earlier, what makes participation attractive?
So in this era, when people are skeptical of government and skeptical of politicians, there are a couple reasons why. They haven't been told the truth. They've been manipulated and not told the truth. So in going forward, we've got to tell the truth. We have to make sure that each I is dotted and every T is crossed. And if we can do that, we can eventually, as a group, as a progressive group, help people to gain trust again in a system. It's not impossible. I think that if we become sincere and truthful people and sincere and truthful groups of people, then others on the outside won't be so skeptical.
I think another thing that's important to talk about when we're talking about participating is, you know, we're supposed to be a democracy in our society. And the way that power is exercised is by being part of, by participating. So literally that is where your power comes from. If you want, you know, if you're unhappy with the way things are, if you want change, if you hate the mayor, whatever it is, and you want to change that, the only way you can do it is by participating. You can, you know, either that or you try to overthrow the government, which, you know, we're seeing what happens when people do that. We're living through that right now. But, you know, all the rights of citizenship are powerful things. I mean, the right to have a say in the control of your nation's destiny is literally what we're talking about here. And that is a powerful thing. That's something that for most of human history, people didn't have. You know, we were all descended from peasants and people that worked in factories and had no power whatsoever. And it's only in the last 150, 200 years that we've even had a chance to exercise these rights that we think of as natural human rights. And so when you realize that this is your power in this society, this is the only power you have, you know, then I think participating becomes a little bit more attractive.
Power of the collective.
Right.
And Karen referred to the truth, and that's very, very much in our faces now, because it seems like there are so many truths that are being promoted. And something that occurred to me about that is when we're listening to these stories that are being put forward as truth, we can start being a little more attentive to what the actions are that follow on to these stories, and also, you know, to help develop progressive stories and talk about the actions that we expect from our chosen candidates to carry out.
Yeah, I thought of an example today. Everybody's bemoaning the fact that gasoline costs $5 a gallon. Well, 10 years ago, if we had been progressive about raising the way our automobiles use gas and going to 40 or 50 miles per hour, guess what? We wouldn't be hurting so much. So our actions have consequences, long range and short term. So it's, you know, we've got to start thinking about those types of things.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the most important thing for me to take away from this is if these powers that we have weren't so important and weren't so powerful, there wouldn't be so many people trying to take them away. And I think,
Exactly.
you know, when we look at it that way and we say, why should I vote? You know, well, then you have people like the Ohio legislature that's literally trying to take your rights to control your own destiny away. So they think it's important. They think it's important to try to take it away from you. So I think that ought to tell us something.